We are looking at the possible questions that can be asked from your NCERT textbook. And in continuation with the previous video, now let us continue further our discussion and move on to the section 16.2, which is about digestion of food. So let us look at the possible questions from digestion of food. So the first thing they can ask you, where does the digestion of food actually begin? The answer is in the buccal cavity or the oral cavity itself. What would be the first secretion that will be mixed with the food? The answer is saliva. So they can ask you something about saliva. What are the possible questions on saliva? Would be the amount of saliva that is produced per day. That would be between 1 to 1.5 liters per day. And please remember, the secretion is decreased during sleep. It is decreased during sleep, and therefore you have what is called as a dragon breath in the morning. The second thing they will ask you about, what is the importance of saliva in oral hygiene. So what is the importance of saliva in oral hygiene? Please try to remember, it has something which are bactericidal. That means these things which are capable of killing bacteria would be called as bactericidal. Please try to remember two. One would be the lysozyme, you are very well aware of, and the second is the thiocyanate ion. So these are two important bactericidal agents that are present in saliva. Then they can ask you, what about the serous secretion here? So the serous secretion is salivary amylase, and we already know that it is also called as ptyalin, and it begins the hydrolysis of starch and is able to convert around 30 to 40% of the starch into what is called as a disaccharide maltose. So why 30 to 40%? Because this enzyme has an optimum pH value of around 6.8, and by the time the bolus is swallowed and is taken by the conduit, the esophagus, into the stomach, where the pH is quite acidic, the enzyme gets denatured. So this is the only time that this enzyme actually gets to act upon, and therefore it is able to convert only 30 to 40% of the starch. But what about the remaining 60 to 70%? So you will have to produce or secrete amylase enzyme, because enzymes are named according to the substrate they act upon. So there has to be another amylase which will take care of the remaining 60 to 70%, and we both know that this is basically the pancreatic amylase, which acts in an alkaline medium. So there is a lingual lipase as well, but you forget about it and just try to remember what is called as the salivary amylase ptyalin, and the beginning of the carbohydrates in the oral cavity. As we know that I have told you that esophagus is a conduit, so it is actually a passage for the food from pharynx to the stomach, and it does not produce any digestive enzyme. Now the lower esophageal sphincter will allow the food to pass through this sphincter into the stomach. And please try to remember one thing that we missed actually in the last video would be what are the various anatomical parts of the stomach. So this part is actually called as the fundus, and this is where the lower end of esophagus is meeting the stomach. This part is called as cardia, and the main part would be called as the corpus of the body, and you already know that this is called as pylorus. And please remember that the original function of the stomach is actually storage, and now the food will be churned into chyme and will be mixed with the gastric secretion. And a very, very important question can come from gastric secretion. So this is what we must revise very fast. Gastric secretion, we know that this center for regulation of gastric secretion is actually located in medulla oblongata. It's a very, very important question. And gastric secretion, you will have the deep tubular glands, and you know that one of the gland is called as the oxyntic gland. The other glands that we will be talking about are the pyloric glands. So we are not going into unnecessary details, just revising everything here. The oxyntic glands have the oxyntic cell, Auxentic cell is also called as the parietal cell. This is the normal name that they actually ask in the entrance examination. And this auxentic cell actually secretes two things. One is called as the HCl, that is responsible for the acidic pH of the gastric secretion, and the second one is called as the Cassel's intrinsic factor. And this Cassel's intrinsic factor is actually responsible for effective absorption of vitamin B12 from the distal most part of the ileum into your body. So please remember, Cassel's intrinsic factor is very, very important for absorption of vitamin B12. So there is an autoimmune condition which is called as pernicious anemia. This is a very, very important question. Very important question. Pernicious anemia, autoimmune condition where antibodies destroy the parietal cells, and there would be a deficiency of Cassel's intrinsic factor, and the vitamin B12 will not be absorbed into the body, and this will cause megaloblastic anemia, and this megaloblastic anemia is actually called as pernicious anemia. I hope this question is now actually etched into your memory, and it is a very, very likely question to be asked in the medical entrance examination. And we will look at another type of cells that are present in the auxentic glands. They are called as the chief cells. So they are called as the chief cells, and they secrete a zymogen. So please remember that many proteolytic enzymes are actually secreted as inactive precursor, and these inactive precursors of the proteolytic enzymes are called as zymogen. The reason is that these proteolytic enzymes are very, very strong enzymes. So if they are active in the gland or the duct itself, it can lead to autodigestion, and it can lead to inflammation of the gland and the duct. It is a very common it's actually a common cause of pancreatitis as well, that trypsin may be present in some amount in active form within the pancreas and can cause inflammation of pancreas, which is called as pancreatitis. Incidentally, the zymogen that is secreted by the chief cell would be called as pepsinogen, and this pepsinogen, when activated into its active form, which is called as pepsin, and this is done by HCl, is a proteolytic enzyme, acts on proteins and digest proteins into peptides and peptones. Not all of them. So we are saying some proteins into peptides and peptones. I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. So this is what happens when pepsinogen is activated into pepsin. So we are looking at an optimum pH value of 2.5 to 1.5 to 2.0. This is pretty acidic, and it is because of the secretion of these parietal cells, which is hydrochloric acid. So this is again a very, very important thing. Then follow your NCERT. NCERT says that in the young infant stomach there would also be prorenin, and this prorenin, mind you, the double N here, so this is not RENIN, this is RENNIN. When it is activated into its active component, which is called as RENNIN, renin, it can convert milk protein casein into para-K-casein and plays an important role in curdling of milk, especially in the infants of human beings. This is, mind you, according to NCERT. And please remember that it also secretes, stomach also secretes a small amount of lipase. So there are some peculiar type of lipids that can be actually hydrolyzed by gastric lipase. As I told you that there is a lingual lipase as well, and gastric lipase along with lingual lipase are the two lipases that are capable of acting in the acidic pH. All other lipases would be active in alkaline pH, namely the pancreatic lipase and the intestinal lipase. So I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. Now we are looking at the pyloric glands, and please remember we are talking about a hormone here. Now this is very, very important to understand. So we are so accustomed to think about enzymes when we talk about digestive system that we may forget that it is actually a hormone, and this hormone is gastrin. So this hormone is gastrin. If the food that is present in the stomach has amino acids or the stomach wall is distended, the gastrin hormone hormone is released, and this gastrin hormone actually stimulates the particular type of cells which are present in the gastric glands. They are called as enterochromaffin like cells, and these enterochromaffin like cells actually, when stimulated by gastrin, secrete histamine, and the histamine actually stimulates the oxyntic or the parietal cells and causes an increase in HCl production. So please remember the role of gastrin in increase HCl secretion. This is a very, very important concept. So again, I am telling you that gastrin acts on the enterochromaffin like cells. They secrete histamine. Histamine stimulate the parietal cells to increase the secretion of HCl. This is something very, very important. I have already told you that the center for regulation of gastric secretion is actually located in the part of the brainstem which is called as medulla oblongata. I hope all these questions that can be asked are now absolutely clear. Now that means the digestion of the protein actually begins in stomach. Please remember this is not all proteins that have been digested. It actually begins the digestion of the protein. It is a strong enzyme, but it is not capable of digesting all the proteins. So it is not so that if we do not produce any proteolytic enzyme down the line, then the proteins will be digested by pepsin or pepsin itself. So it is not going to happen, and it actually begins the digestion of proteins. This is now absolutely clear. Now we know that there is a pyloric sphincter, and that pyloric sphincter serves a very important purpose, because majority of the food will be actually digested in the small intestine. So it is important that only small amount of food enters into the first part of the duodenum through the pyloric sphincter. Please remember that duodenum first part is the first part of the small intestine that receives the acidic chyme from the stomach. So therefore, and on top of it, please again remember that now the enzymes will be acting in an alkaline pH between 8 to 9. So there is an urgent need to take care of this acidic chyme. Somehow it has to be neutralized very fast, because all these enzymes now which are capable of acting in the alkaline pH needs such a medium, and therefore it is very easy to understand that the secretions of the duodenum will be highly alkaline. And please try to remember the Brunner's gland that I told you in the last video, that they are actually submucosal in location, and this is a very, very important question. The second thing would be that we will look at the hormonal regulation of the gastrointestinal function here, and we will see the chyme that is entering into the first part of the duodenum. What is the nature of this chyme? If it is fat rich, if it is rich in fats, then the upper small intestinal mucosa, upper small intestinal mucosa means the duodenal mucosa can secrete two hormones. Again, I am talking about hormones, and one of the hormone is gastric inhibitory peptide. It is an enterogesterone, and enterogesterone is an agent that is actually secreted by the intestine and acts on the stomach and reduces the peristalsis or the motility of the stomach. So it is an enterogesterone. And secondly, it can also secrete what is called as cholecystokinin. This is very, very important. This cholecystokinin contracts gallbladder. So it contracts gallbladder, and gallbladder, you know, stores and concentrates bile, and through that common hepatopancreatic duct, if you remember, the bile will reach, which is containing actually bile salts that help in the digestion and absorption of fat. They will reach at the required destination, which is the second part of the duodenum, through the common hepatopancreatic duct, the opening of which is actually guarded by the sphincter of Oddi. So this is what happens when cholecystokinin is secreted. Second, it also stimulates pancreas. And pancreas secretes serous secretion. Mind you, I have already told you that this is enzyme rich secretions, and they will contain the pancreatic enzyme that includes pancreatic lipase, and we can actually correlate the necessity of increasing the amount of pancreatic lipase because this chyme is fat rich. Now, the second hormone, the third hormone actually that can be released by the duodenal mucosa would be when it is acid rich. So none of the chyme will carry only fat or only acid. So we are talking about fat rich and acid rich. And this time the hormone that is actually secreted is called as gastrin, and gastrin stimulates pancreas for mucoid secretion. So this particular, sorry, so let me correct it. And so that means if the chyme is acid rich, so let us get it correct now slowly. So if the chyme that is reaching in the first part of the duodenum is acid rich, the upper small intestinal mucosa will secrete a hormone which is called as secretin. This secretin acts on the pancreas and stimulates pancreas to secrete more of the mucoid secretions, and these mucoid secretions will carry a very important thing which is bicarbonate ion. Now you can correlate with the neutralization of the acid that is needed. So therefore this type of secretion will reach the second part of the duodenum to neutralize the acidic chyme. And the second, it is again an enterogastron. So it is again an enterogastron. So whenever they are asking you the question on the hormonal regulation of gastrointestinal tract, you look at your chapter number 22, endocrine system, and they have mentioned it in a paragraph. Role of other organs in, say, for example, secretion of hormones. So there are the GI hormones mentioned, and please remember 4 of them: gastrin, cholecystokinin, secretin, and gastric inhibitory peptide. So this is a question that you need to prepare. It is not given in this chapter, but it has been mentioned in a paragraph in the chemical control and coordination, chemical coordination and integration chapter, the last chapter of human physiology. So now let us look at the next secretion that will take care of the digestion of the food. That would be the bile, and bile we know is secreted by the hepatocytes or the liver cell. It is stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. Bile does not contain any digestive enzyme, but it contains something very, very important which are called as bile salts. The bile salts are the derivatives of cholesterol. Now look at this molecule. So an important use of cholesterol in the human body is the production of, it's a precursor of bile salt. Bile salts are amphipathic molecules. One end is hydrophilic, the other end is hydrophobic. So they can bind to the large fat globules on their hydrophobic end, and a sort of, you must have seen these type of formation where one end is hydrophilic, the other end is hydrophobic, and then actually it breaks down the large fat globules into smaller fat globules. This increases the surface area for the lipases to act upon the smaller fat globules, and this process is actually called as the emulsification. Incidentally, the secretion of bile overall must be alkaline, because now you do not want any secretion to be acidic, and around 700 ml of bile is produced per day. So this is the question that they can ask you from bile. And please remember what exactly is emulsification and what is the nature of bile salts, and the precursor is cholesterol. Now the next secretion, this is very, very important, would be the pancreatic secretion, the secretion from pancreatic acini. So pancreatic acini, the exocrine part of the gland which is pancreas, secretes hydrolytic digestive enzyme, and I told you that this is one organ which is most important for the purpose of digestion in human body, because it is capable of secreting hydrolytic enzymes to digest all the types of biomacromolecules or biomolecules. So let us look at what are those. So this is where you will see the presence of pancreatic amylase, and this pancreatic amylase, acting in an alkaline pH between 8 to 9, will be responsible for completing the job that was left by salivary amylase, and will hydrolyze another 60 to 70% of the remaining starch into disaccharide, which is called as maltose. So we are absolutely sure about it. The second thing would be the pancreatic lipase, and this pancreatic lipase will take care of the fats and will directly hydrolyze. We have already talked about that fat is not a polymer and it is not a macromolecule either, but because it is present in a particular fraction of when you put a cell or into lysis, or you break the cell, and then it actually is separated in the what is called as the acid insoluble pool, and therefore we say that it is studied with other biomolecules, but it is not a polymer, not a macromolecule. and some of the fat is directly hydrolyzed into fatty acid and the constituent glycerol. There, this is fatty acids and monoacyl glycerols. They can actually be broken down directly, but not all. So I am again saying that some fat. So this means that still some fat is left in the food that is going ahead. So this is very, very important to remember. Just reflect back and just understand what has happened till now and what is left to be digested. Now, the third thing would be a nuclease. So I am writing these things in an unusual manner. I will be looking at the protease separately because this is where a question is most likely to come. And these nuclease are of two types. Now, mind you, this is DNAs and RNAs, two type of nucleic acid. To hydrolyze them, you require two different hydrolytic enzymes. So one would be called as DNAs, the other is called as RNAs, and they will be hydrolyzed into corresponding nucleotides, into their corresponding nucleotides, DNA into deoxyribonucleotides and RNA into RNA or ribonucleotides. But we are most interested in the proteases here. Again, they are zymogens, and one of them is trypsinogen. The second one is chymotrypsinogen, and the third one is trichymotrypsinogen, and the third one is procarboxypeptidase. All of them are inactive precursor. Now what happens is that first thing, some amount of trypsinogen is converted into trypsin or activated into trypsin. This is what is the beginning of the process. So some trypsinogen gets activated into its form, which is called as trypsin, and the agent that is responsible is another enzyme that is secreted by the upper small intestinal mucosa, and this is enterokinase. This time it is an enzyme. Now please remember this, enterokinase, this is not enterogestrone. It activates some amount of trypsinogen into trypsin, not all, and then this trypsin, once activated, can have autolytic activity, which means autocatalytic activity, which means it can itself activate the remaining of the trypsinogen into trypsin, and can also convert chymotrypsinogen into chymotrypsin and the procarboxypeptidase into carboxypeptidase. Now this thing I hope you have understood absolutely clearly, so I will just revise it for you. So first, a small amount of trypsinogen is activated into trypsin by enterokinase. Once this small amount of trypsin is activated, it has autocatalytic function. The remaining trypsinogen is also activated into trypsin by trypsin itself, and it also activates the two other zymogens, chymotrypsinogen into chymotrypsin and procarboxypeptidase into carboxypeptidase. Now it is important to understand that what these proteolytic enzymes do. They are very, very strong proteolytic enzyme. So what is left? What is left after the secretion of after the action of the gastric juice? After the action of the gastric juice, which actually contains pepsinogen and which was activated into pepsin by HCl, and it was actually acting on some of the proteins. So please remember that now these enzymes will be digesting proteins. There will be significant amount of proteins left that were not taken care of by pepsin, and then obviously the end product of the action of the pepsin will be present, and they are peptides and partially digested proteins which are called as peptones. I hope you can now easily understand this. This is the thing on which the pancreatic proteolytic enzymes will act, and they will be hydrolyzed into very simple aminopeptides and dipeptides. So this is very, very strong action, and please see that this pancreas is a very, very important digestive gland, and as you can see, as I told you, that the dysfunction of the pancreas will most severely or adversely affect the process of digestion in the human beings, for the simple reason we are looking at amylase, we are looking at lipase, we are looking at nucleases, and we are looking at very, very strong proteases as well. So this is what happens when the pancreatic juice acts upon the food that is present in the small intestine. Mind you, majority of the digestion is happening in duodenum and jejunum. So this is where the majority of the digestion actually takes place. Ileum primarily will be for the absorption. Yes, the process of digestion can continue continue into the ileum as well, but primarily the distal part of ileum especially will be responsible for absorption, and we will come back to that point later in this video. Now the process is very simple. Let us make a checklist of what is left that needs to be digested. So at this juncture, now let us relax and let us think that what are the things that are present now in this partially or nearly completely digested food that need to be digested. So if you look at the carbohydrate, it would contain maltose. So all the starch has been converted into maltose and isomaltose. So let us talk about maltose only. And if you have consumed milk sugar, there would be another disaccharide that was not acted upon by any of the enzyme previously, and this thing is called as lactose. And the cane sugar will be sucrose, will also be present. So this is what remains of the carbohydrate at this juncture. And if you look at the fats, then there would be obviously fats themselves, because some amount of the fat, or largely a large amount of fat I should say, actually was converted into the fatty acids, monoacyl glycerols, etc. by the pancreatic lipase, but some amount of fat is definitely left that needs to be digested. And if you look at the protein component, now what you are left with is aminopeptides and dipeptides. So this is what is left. This is just one step away from digestion. This is the thing that is left, and obviously there would be the two nucleotides, and these nucleotides would be DNA nucleotides and the RNA nucleotides. I hope now this thing is now absolutely clear. Now it makes sense if we have to produce one more secretion, and this secretion would be called as the intestinal juice. NCERT calls it as by another name, which is called as succus entericus. And please remember, if you look at the mucosal lining of this part of the intestine, it will be lined by columnar epithelium that would be brush bordered. And I hope you remember that brush border and microvilli, what exactly it means. So therefore these enzymes sometimes are also called as the brush bordered enzymes, and they are present in the intestinal juice, which actually NCERT calls it as succus entericus as well. And let us see that what are the enzymes that are actually present in this intestinal juice. And now this is very simple. I need to have maltase, and will hydrolyze maltose into 2 molecules of glucose. This is the end of the digestion process for starch. And if you look at lactose, then there has to be lactase, and this lactase will hydrolyze into glucose and galactose, and there should be sucrase, and sucrase would be glucose plus fructose. And you can see the important hexoses, the monosaccharides, the end product of digestion of carbohydrate. And the remaining fat would be by the intestinal lipase, and this intestinal lipase will again convert it into fatty acid or hydrolyze it into fatty acid and glycerols. So I hope this thing is now absolutely clear. Now for protein we require aminopeptidase, and we also require what is called as a dipeptidase. As you can see, this is very simple, and they are hydrolyzed into constituent amino acids. And there has to be a nucleotidase. This nucleotidase will convert this or hydrolyze these nucleotides into nucleosides. Obviously you know about the phosphate group that would be removed, and then you require another enzyme which is called as nucleosidase, and will be converting it into pentose sugar and the nitrogenous base. And this is how the process of the digestion is brought to its logical end, and everything has been hydrolyzed into the constituent monomeric unit in cases of protein, carbohydrate and nucleic acid, and the constituents in cases of fats as well. And now these are the end products of the digestion. This is how digestion actually is brought about in the human body. Now the next thing would be that in this part of the intestine, now these digested products must be absorbed into the body, and for absorption to happen, there has to be an effective surface area. So if the surface area is increased, obviously effective surface area means more efficient absorption of the nutrients across the gastrointestinal lining from the lumen of the alimentary canal into our body.